All right, man, peace. As many of you brothers know, I have addressed the topic of Russell Westbrook in many of my videos in the past pertaining to the NBA. I think that he's a necessary evil, if that term is even apropos. I won't even call him a necessary evil. He's just a necessary component that you must have in every era of sport, whether it be football, basketball, or baseball, because he adds flavor, he adds decor. He's never going to be a championship level player, ever, unless he just gets older and gets traded to a team that is led by a strong-minded coach and real leadership, because he's not a real leader. And he has many ardent NBA fans fooled, especially those of his supporters in the media who love his aggressive style of play and try to act as if he harkens back to the 90s style of play when he really doesn't. If Westbrook was playing back in the 90s, he'd be more of a Latrell Sprewell type. He would not be allowed to do what he does in this era. He just wouldn't. And that's why I call him the Allen Iverson of this era. And sometimes people get confused when I say that, as if I'm trying to imply that he plays in the same way as Iverson played. He does not. But he has a similar role. His role is to create a great cult of personality. He'll have a very strong following because of how he plays, his mannerisms, his gesticulations, his personality, his overall talent. As I've stated incessantly, he plays great, but he's not a great player. He does not have a real mind for the game. He does not have good basketball acumen. I think that his teammates love him, but they don't like playing with him. And that brings me to my main point in regards to this video, and probably a follow-up video that I'll do tomorrow after we get the results of their last game, and we get to see if he indeed does get the 16 rebounds that he needs. Russell Westbrook, he knows what his legacy is going to be in the NBA, and that is as the triple-double man. I mentioned this in another video. In the post-game interview, when the interviewer, the reporter, asked Westbrook about, do you know that you're the first person to have a 45-point, 15 assists, 15 rebound, triple-double on a Sunday and all this other nonsense, he has an uncontrollable smile. Why is that? Because that is what he plays for. Yes, he plays very hard. Yes, he wants to win. But he loves triple-doubles. That's what he loves the most. I don't care what anybody says. He loves triple-doubles like a crackhead loves a good 8-ball. He just does. And he can't control himself. He's a crackhead for triple-doubles. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Get the dub last night, knocking off the Heat and officially clinching a playoff berth. Russell Westbrook had his 25th triple-double of the season. Now he only needs 16 rebounds in his final game against the Grizz to average a triple-double for the season. Max Kellerman, explain to me why Westbrook, last year's MVP, is flying under the radar in this year's combo.
Well, let me say this first before Max Kellerman attempts to respond or Stephen A. chimes in. The reason why Westbrook is under the radar is because what he's doing is less illustrious because of the teammates that he has with him. Even though for all intents and purposes, Carmelo Anthony is a has-been, he's washed up, and he's always been overrated in my view anyway. And Paul George is a player with superstar talent physically, but mentally, he's another person who's not an alpha. So he does not even have the ability to play a role on the team that could be complementary to Westbrook like a Kevin Durant did. Because quiet as kept, KD has more alpha male traits than Paul George does. Paul George is not a leader at all. At least KD has alpha male physical abilities. And he aspires to be an alpha male at times, even though I think that even he understands what he's not. Paul George is just enjoying the process of getting feted by multiple NBA teams and hopefully signing a max contract. But he's just not that guy. Point being is this: Westbrook is flying under the radar this season because his teammates are more notable. And he's not quite having this season this year that he had last year.
Not under the radar. He's not on the radar. And by the way, before I say anything, Stephen A. Molly, who's my favorite player in the NBA?
Russell Westbrook. Yeah, we know.
That's a damn lie. Your favorite player is LeBron James. You're one of LeBron James's bitch boys. Everybody knows it. You're a LeBron James super fan. And I want you guys to pay very close attention to what Max Kellerman says here in this segment, because he's going to reveal that he understands that he overrates LeBron James. He's going to convey that by his commentary about Russell Westbrook. Just pay very close attention to what he says about Russell Westbrook's stats. What he's really telling you is that he understands essentially that LeBron James is overrated by the liberal sports media, including himself. But he does not understand that that's what he is acknowledging. But let's listen to what he has to say.
Westbrook's my favorite player. I don't like to watch anyone more than Westbrook.
Assassin.
But the reason he's not the MVP or in even the conversation this year.
Did you hear what Molly Karam said about Russell Westbrook? She said he's an assassin. Yes, oftentimes he assassinates his own team.
Is the numbers signify something to people that is actually true. Last year he was incredible leading that cast, averaging a triple-double, and I was glad to be alive to witness it. And this year, he's essentially also averaging a triple-double. He has a crazy...
I agree with Kellerman on that sentiment. I actually am glad to have been alive to see someone average triple-double, because I did not think that I would ever see it. I remember being a kid and my father had an NBA encyclopedia, and I remember looking up the stats for Oscar Robertson and saying to myself, wow, somebody was doing this. And people don't understand, even though he only averaged a triple-double for one season, Robertson had about 7 or 8 years where he was right there, like 9.8 rebounds, 9.6 rebounds, so on and so forth. Like just right there, where he could have rolled off 9, 10 straight triple-double seasons, but he just didn't care because his basketball IQ was far higher than Westbrook's, and that's why his shooting percentages were far higher than Westbrook's. Oscar Robertson for his career was about a 48% shooter from the field, in an era where it was very common for players to shoot in the low 40s.
Down tonight, he'll do it consecutive seasons. Oh my God! I don't care how ripe the environment is for this kind of feat to be accomplished by someone. It's accomplished by him, and it is amazing. And again, I'm glad to have lived through this era to see it, whether or not he gets the 16 boards. But he's not in the MVP conversation because people look at those numbers and they see empty calories. Not in the sense that it didn't help the team to win, but in the sense that it inhibited the team from playing better.
Now, did you hear what Max Kellerman just stated? He basically has put forth the sentiment and has provided the understanding that I've been saying for the longest time pertaining to Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. That is that though they are great players and what they do on the court has a direct correlation oftentimes to their team's successes and failures, that they operate according to a statistical accumulation style of play. So what they do is they will often inhibit their teammates from becoming an active part of the overall team scheme because they start to just envelop their teammates because of the strength of the aura that they emit. Sometimes they're, like I state, sometimes your gift can also be your curse. And Russell Westbrook is just a miniature version of LeBron James. He's like a LeBron James mini-me. He really is a force of nature out there on the basketball court, as is LeBron. And that is why you'll often find that they get too much credit. They get too much credit for their team's successes. And it's just interesting that Max Kellerman is noting this fact when it comes to Westbrook, but not when it comes to LeBron. Particularly since Russell Westbrook's OKC Thunder basically have the same record as LeBron's Cleveland Cavaliers team, and they're playing in a much tougher conference overall, at least according to the media. At least according to the media. In my view, the Western Conference is better, but the gap is not as large as they make it out to be. But they are playing in a tougher conference, and even though they have bigger names on OKC this season, Carmelo Anthony's a shell of his former self. He really needs to retire, but he won't because he's proud. He's going to play at least 2 more seasons to see if the fall off is real. And in regards to Paul George is, he's the guy who's going to give you 20 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and that's all he's ever going to be. He's not going to be a real presence on your team. But once again, it's very interesting that Max Kellerman is noting a certain facet of what Russell Westbrook does, a certain aspect of what he brings, which is that he is oftentimes a gift and a curse. But when it comes to LeBron James, who plays basically a very similar style, not the same style, a very similar style, because LeBron obviously is much more proficient, much more economical than Westbrook. But LeBron James will get credit for having a team win 50 games when they had big names to start the season, but he was so unable to make them better that they had to trade away the whole squad and bring in a whole nother team. But supposedly he should still be the NBA MVP, according to Max Kellerman.
Look, Billy Donovan is a real coach. Wherever you rank him, he's not a bad coach. He's a real coach. Paul George is a two-way all-star, and sure, Carmelo Anthony is in decline, and he's maybe not a...
He's in severe decline. Carmelo has been in decline, for the last 2 years at least with the Knicks. This season, he just looked like an old man, and they made a big deal about that hoodie Melo nonsense before this season. I mean, they need to call his ass wheelchair Melo.
Perfect fit on the team, but he is still excellent, and in fact, he's become somewhat underrated. Carmelo can still get it offensively.
Yeah, you mean in practice, when he's shooting at the basket by himself.
And so, when you have that kind of talent on the team, remember, Stephen A., I wasn't sure the Thunder would be better than the Rockets this year, and it turns out, boy, they were not. But I believe you said they would be, and I think most people felt they would be. That was going to be the major threat to the Warriors. When you have that kind of talent around you, and by the way, Steven Adams is a player, and they traded and acquired interesting pieces that were good supplementary parts throughout the season. When you have that and you're...
Let me say this very quickly. The Golden State Warriors better hope that they can avoid the OKC Thunder in the first round, because I have a feeling that OKC will look like a very different squad in the playoffs. Just a feeling, just a suspicion. They still have a great lineup overall in regards to talent and experience combined when you place them in contrast to the other teams in the Western Conference outside of Golden State and the Rockets. They're going to give whoever they play in the first round hell. And Golden State better hope it's not them, because they don't have Steph Curry, and I don't trust Kevin Durant in an authoritative position or a position of leadership.
Averaging a triple-double, and you guys are the ace seed or something like it, people realize you can't be the MVP.
Well,
I agree. Please remember that when you talk about Mr. LeBron James. You can't be the MVP when you start your season out with all the notable figures on your team that you had. And they have to clean out your entire roster, bring in a whole new set of guys, because you took a month and a half off where you mentally tapped out because you realized that these veterans on your squad were not going to deal with your bullshit. They were not going to kowtow to you. So what does that say about your leadership abilities, that they have to bring in a whole bunch of guys, who are around 25, 26 years old and have never won anything and pretty much look up to you like a god? What does that say? The one thing that I will say, and once again shows that Westbrook and LeBron are far more alike than certain people care to say, they're both better at this point in their careers by themselves as a one-man show. I don't think that LeBron will particularly fit in well with other prominent players, but we'll find out. We'll see. We'll see. He's far more proficient and has far higher basketball IQ than Westbrook, and I think he's much more self-aware. So he may be more willing to conform to allowing another great player to shine, and maybe even allowing himself to be taught an actual basketball system if he were to go somewhere else. But we'll see, because much of the NBA genuflects in front of LeBron.
I'm going to be more direct than I think you just were, because I struggled to really get where you were coming from until that last part, in all honesty. It's this simple to me. Carmelo Anthony and Paul George have been overrated this year in terms of what Russell Westbrook has at his disposal.
I agree with that to a degree, Stephen A. Smith. I agree with that to a degree, but I think that it also has revealed that Russell Westbrook just does not play well with others. He just doesn't. He's that kid in kindergarten that you have to let him play with the paints and, the rattles and the little toy cars by himself. Because when another child comes over to play with him, he's going to get a little violent. He's going to get a little cantankerous. He's just that guy. And I stated this already. Westbrook would be much better as a one-man act as a sideshow for the NBA because he's not a championship level player. His brain just doesn't function that way. He only knows one speed, and that's full throttle. And when you're talking about championship level performers, they know the importance of sometimes you got to drive at 50 miles an hour. Sometimes you got to put the pedal to the metal. He doesn't understand those differentiations. He doesn't know when to do what.
The fact of the matter is, I believe in Paul George, and I believe that he is a star in this league for years to come.
I think he's a star. He's a secondary star. You don't want him as your leader, though. You want him to be the second guy, or maybe really even the third guy on a championship level team with strong leadership. Like, he'd be a great third guy on the Golden State Warriors with a Steph Curry there and a Kevin Durant as your number 2. Paul George would be a great number 3. Much like a Klay Thompson. To me, Klay Thompson and Paul George are very similar.
Only shoot, about 42% from the field right now, all right? He's not shooting that great from the field. There have been big moments against teams on nationally televised games where he hasn't shown up and do what we know he can do.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, let's be for real. Outside of that playoff series in 2013 when he kind of showed out against the Miami Heat, he had that dunk over Birdman. When has he ever played particularly well in the playoffs? Last season in the first round, he put up good numbers, but he always fell short in the clutch when they needed him to perform against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They got swept in that series and easily could have won 3 out of those 4 games. He was nowhere to be found. So Paul George is telling you he's not that guy in a clutch situation. He's just not that guy. And that's one of the main issues with the Thunder. They don't have a clutch shooter. They just don't have that person. So there's some issues with that team. The only way that they're going to be successful is if in the playoffs they up their level of physicality and their man-on-man defense. Because they're a one-on-one team, both offensively and defensively. And the referees have to allow them to utilize that style in order for them to be successful. If it becomes about who executes better, they're going to lose.
In the case of Carmelo Anthony, this is a guy that's 33 years of age, and in all honesty, my brother, I love him. He's looked it. He's looked it.
No, sir. Actually, he's looked 43 years old. He has not looked 33. I've seen great players at 33. 33 is normally the end or near the end of a great player's greatness, because from about 31 to 34 is when great players enter into that realm of their mental prime. You have your physical prime from about 27 to 30, and then you have your mental prime from about 31 to 34, 35. Carmelo Anthony has never been a player who had a high basketball IQ to begin with. And he was never particularly a transcendent athlete physically. So he pretty much is just done. He doesn't even know where he wants to be on the basketball court. And when you watch an OKC Thunder game, pay very close attention to Carmelo Anthony and his meanderings across the court. When he knows that he's not going to get the basketball, he does nothing. He doesn't box out. He doesn't sprint. He doesn't play defense. He doesn't pick up for his teammates. He doesn't do anything. I mean, to be quite honest with you, he's just a waste out there on the court.
He hasn't looked in the greatest shape. He hasn't looked like the number 1 option that he was for the New York Knicks for years.
He wasn't the number 1 option for the New York Knicks other than one season, which was in the 2012-2013 season when the Knicks won 54 games. And by the way, they should have beat the Pacers in that second round matchup had they executed in certain games. They lost in 6, and they really should have won that series because they were the better team. And they actually played the Miami Heat very well that regular season. But Carmelo showed you that he was just not that guy. And of course, you had J.R. Smith, that idiot, who in the opening round of the playoffs imploded against the Celtics and threw off their whole rhythm. They were never the same in the playoffs after J.R. Smith did what he did.
I have been a huge fan of Carmelo Anthony throughout his entire career, and I still am. I'm waiting for the moment where Carmelo Anthony is given the ball at crunch time in a postseason game with a playoff or a series or a championship on the line, because I believe he has the kind of heart that will show up. But the reality...
Well, the reality, since you're about to say the reality of something, brother, the reality of the situation is that Carmelo Anthony is not a championship level player. And he's never shown the ability to make clutch shots when it truly matters in big spots. That's why he's only been to one conference finals in 15 years. That's the bottom line of it. And the only reason why he got that far back in 2009 was because he had a great leader in Chauncey Billups, one of the most underrated leaders in NBA history. Chauncey Billups is one of the great leaders of the last 30 years in the NBA. Very underrated. They should have won back-to-back championships in Detroit in 2004 and 2005, but Rasheed Wallace's bubblehead ass blew the series in 2005 when he let Robert Horry get open. But once again, that's the only reason why Carmelo Anthony had the modicum of playoff success that he's had, was because he had Chauncey Billups for a season or two. Or let me check that. He had him for 3 or 4 seasons. But the one season when they were extremely successful in the playoffs was because of Chauncey Billups, not Carmelo. Before that, they had Iverson, and it was the two of them really just trying to not get in each other's way and play hip-hop basketball, trying to see who looks better with cornrows and a headband on out there on the court.
Is that he's had to take a relegated role with Oklahoma City. It has been an adjustment for him. It's been an adjustment for Billy Donovan. You have a potpourri of issues that they have to address. There's no question about it.
Yes, one of the issues is their coach, Billy Donovan. He's scared of Westbrook. How the hell are they going to go anywhere and your head coach is scared of your best player? Something's got to give, Stephen A. Smith. Westbrook is so talented. He's so talented physically that they're scared to tell him that what his problem is that he's a tweener. He's too small to be a great shooting guard, and he does not have the basketball acumen to be a great point guard. So he gets a lot of cheap assists. He dominates the basketball, and they're always going to be anywhere from 45 to 50 wins as long as they have a physical players playing around him, like a Steven Adams, because they're going to get a lot of rebounds. They're going to play tough. They're going to play rough because they're going to get their spirit from him. But when they play intelligent teams that are well coached, they're going to lose. Period.
In the end, what it comes down to is we look at this team, their 47-34 record, how they've been up and down this year, and instead of appreciating the greatness of Russell Westbrook carrying this team on its back the way that we should, what we've done is instead we've looked at Carmelo Anthony and Paul George, and we said they are not what they were supposed to be. We expected more from them. And that's how we're looking at them right now, because
whose job is it to make sure that the team functions to the best of its ability? It's the point guard, Stephen A.
I would agree with that, Max Kellerman, if they actually had a smart coach who had wherewithal and courage to actually make Westbrook the point guard that he's supposed to be, to make him the coach out there on the floor. Billy Donovan is clearly scared of Russell Westbrook, and it's hurting the team. Because in the same way that Cleveland plays the LeBron James system, OKC plays the Russell Westbrook system. And that is, I'm going to go up and down the court at 1,000 miles an hour. I'm going to steal your rebounds from you, Steven Adams. I'm going to get a bunch of cheap assists while I penetrate to the basket and just dump off to somebody right by the basket. I'm also going to drive the lane and throw up a bunch of wild layups when I have wide open shooters. Right, those would be real assists when you actually pass the ball to an open man, as opposed to getting 8 or 9 dump-off assists to somebody at the basket when you drive the lane, knowing that they're going to double team you, and you just lob it up there, you just dump it off. They have a major problem out there. Sometimes people are too talented for their own good.
Westbrook is the point guard.
And the coach.
Okay, but in the end, in the end, if LeBron's team underperforms, who are they going to point to? Ty Lue or LeBron James?
Well, damn, we already know who you guys are going to blame. You're going to blame Ty Lue, especially a super fan like you. You guys combined with LeBron damn near drove Ty Lue into an insane asylum. I mean, shit. You had the man looking like Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
LeBron numbers, maybe better, at least the counting numbers, right? You almost average a triple-double in consecutive seasons. What do I always say about Westbrook? His issue is, in crunch time, he pulls too hard. He wants it too much. And so he monopolizes the ball. He needs to...
Well, that happens with people who have a low basketball IQ. When the moment gets pressurized, they panic. And when they panic, that stops them from being able to see the floor on a macrocosmic level. They have tunnel vision. That's why you'll never see Westbrook make the right pass in the clutch moment, ever. Every time the moment gets clutch, he's going to drive the ball hard to the lane, or he's going to pull up for one of those ridiculous snake bite jump shots that he takes from mid-range, or he's going to take a wild three that's going to bounce off the back of the damn rim.
Oh, no,
you're not,
a little
bit.
That's inaccurate.
Paul
There have
George
been
and
plenty of
Carmelo
times
Anthony are
where he has
underperforming.
given
That's
them
on
the ball,
Westbrook.
and they've been wide open, and they've missed shots. I've seen Russell Westbrook give them the ball, and they haven't converted. That's a fact.
So that means you don't give him the ball anymore?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he did give them the ball, and they didn't convert. Who said they didn't get the ball?
That's the reason they're... But Stephen A., if guys aren't in rhythm, if they're not getting enough touches throughout the game, if one guy's usage rate is way too high, that affects other players. The same way you give James Harden credit for the way, and I think it is a point. Remember, I said that's evidence on Harden's side for the case for MVP, that he has actually, that team never loses when they're healthy, right? Even if he does have a great supporting cast, he is certainly not dragging them down and obviously elevating everybody. So Harden's been able to do that. Sure, some of that's on D'Antoni. Westbrook also has a very good supporting cast. It's less perfectly suited for him, maybe, but it's an...
Yes, it is less perfectly suited for him. And then the question would be, what is the perfect supporting cast for Russell Westbrook? And that's why I've stated in a previous video that the perfect supporting cast for Russell Westbrook is very similar to the supporting cast that Allen Iverson had in 01. Guys who are just going to be there for his glorification, going to do all the dirty work, except in this era, they also have to be able to make wide open jumpers. But they need players that are just going to be there to worship at the temple of Russell Westbrook, who just want to see him average 35, 12, and 12 every season, and they just get all the loose balls and throw it back to him, and they'll make wide open jumpers when he's ready to pass it to him. But Russell Westbrook cannot play with any other stars or guys who can actually create their own shot and, you know, who want to have the ball on the wing and go out there, man, one-on-one. Those are not the players that are conducive to playing with Westbrook.
Excellent supporting cast. It is on him and Billy Donovan to figure out how to optimize it, and they have not done it. He's the highest usage player, and he's the point guard.
Where were you at the beginning of this year and halfway into the season when they were all hovering around 17, 18, 19 shots per game? They were getting the ball then. They weren't winning then either.
That's very true, Stephen A. Smith, and that's a good point. But what I will say is this. When you're playing in a very haphazard system and you're getting the ball in a very willy-nilly way, sometimes you won't convert because you don't know when you're going to get the ball again. You get nervous. When you're playing in a real offensive system with a coach that knows how to discipline his point guard, you know, okay, this play is being ran for me. Here's where I'm supposed to get it, and this is what I'm going to do because we worked on this in practice. When you're playing that street ball style that Westbrook likes to play and he just passes it to you and says, okay, go get yours, you might be a little nervous, even if you're a Carmelo Anthony. Because in Carmelo's mind, it's like, if I miss this jump shot, I might not get the ball again, or I don't know when I'm going to get it again. Because we're not running real plays. We're playing in the Westbrook system. So a lot of that plays into the mind of a player who's on a new team and has a new role that he's not quite sure about.
And so ultimately now it's up to Russell Westbrook to shoot 21 shots a game. Paul George is at 16. Carmelo is at 15. So they've dropped off a little bit in terms of their shot attempts. But this man has given them the ball plenty of times. And plenty of times they have not converted. That's just a fact.
Right. It's not just about shots, though. It's about the rhythm of the game. It's about the fact that they... Listen,
you have to blame the coach for that, Max Kellerman. The coach has to establish the cadence and the timing and the rhythm of the game. The point guard's job is to execute what the head coach has told him. The head coach has allowed Westbrook to run the Russell Westbrook system for the last 3 years.
Be exactly even. Because you could see when that happened, when Paul George and Carmelo first got there, you could see Westbrook was being overly deferential. I'm not saying how many shots each player should get. I'm saying, Russell Westbrook, it's on you to figure it out. You're clearly the best player on the team. You're an...
Yes, he is clearly the best player on the team. The problem is that he's probably the player with the most clout, and there are no other intelligent players there that are physically talented enough to challenge him. So when everyone on the team has a low basketball IQ, or in the case of Paul George, is not confident enough to challenge Westbrook on certain things, that's going to lead to confusion throughout your roster. And then the coach is scared to say anything to Westbrook. Why is that? Because the organization and the city don't want to alienate Westbrook and have him leave when his contract is up. because they're still scarred from Kevin Durant leaving.
Time great talent. We have seen
So in other
Russell
words, you're
Westbrook
not
and
holding
KD
Melo
for
and
that
Paul
matter.
George accountable for missing shots? You're saying that they missed shots because
Why
they
do
weren't
you
in
think-
rhythm because Russell Westbrook didn't give them the ball?
Let me ask you this. Why do you think the Thunder couldn't get by the Warriors in that Game 7, in that series?
I'm not
The
talking
Thunder
about that.
actually-
I'm talking about this
But I
team.
am,
Melo and
Stephen
Paul
A.
George
It's a-
weren't on the
it's a
team. They weren't on the team.
It's a persistent...
They won this.
Well, look, Kellerman is digging up some old dirt on Westbrook, but we all know the reason why they lost that series, at least I know, the reason why they lost that series to the Golden State Warriors is because Golden State did not take them seriously until Game 5. They really didn't. They thought that the OKC Thunder were playing above their heads, and eventually they were going to make so many mistakes that they were going to allow them back into the series anyway. And when they saw the level that OKC was playing at through 4 games, they said to themselves, wow, we're going to have to give our all. Because Golden State was playing at a playoff level throughout the entire regular season of the 2015-2016 season. And when they got to the playoffs, they didn't have another level to raise it up to. That's why they lost so many games in the playoffs, because they were facing teams that were raising their level and they didn't have a level to go to. And then you add to that the fact that Curry was hurt throughout the playoffs. That's why they struggled so much. But that OKC series really showed the heart and the mettle of Golden State. And then on top of that, of course, Westbrook did not perform well in the clutch, because that's not what he does. He's not a good clutch player in clutch moments in big spots. And I'm sure people will disagree with that. But he's just not the guy that you want running your offense in a pressurized situation. I'm sorry.
With Russell Westbrook, when he feels like the team needs more, he pulls too hard. When he needs to be more of a point guard, he turns into more of an attacker, a killer. That's his mentality.
But
That's
you're
why he's my
talking in
favorite
generalities.
player. But he has
And
yet
I'm saying
to find
to you,
the balance.
I understand that. We've all talked about Russ for years over there in that regard, which is why it shocked me the amount of times I have seen him give Carmelo the ball, give Paul George the ball, and Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, who usually come through in moments like that, fail to do
Why
so.
do you think they're not?
I don't understand what games Stephen A. Smith is watching where Paul George and Carmelo Anthony always come through in big spots. Neither one of them have had much playoff success. If they were as clutch as he claims they were, they'd have much more playoff success. But that's pretty much it on that. We'll see what happens with crackhead Westbrook and his pursuit of triple-doubles. But anyway, peace.